Hey everybody, happy Hospital Week, happy Nurses Week. This is going to be a short message on one of the things that leaders should be doing to understand and manage the tide of burnout on their team. I use the term tide because there's an ebb and flow to it, and it can be catchy as well. Burnout isn't necessarily localized to an individual. Teams, especially dealing with a prolonged crisis like we're dealing with here, teams can experience it as well, and leaders underestimate how well they set the tone. So to whatever degree that you believe that your team takes its cues from you, multiply that by about 10, and that's probably the actual extent to which your team is depending on you, especially during this calling of a crisis, to lean on you. So to kick this off, very briefly, I do a quick little thought exercise and ask you to think of one of the two things that motivate all human beings. And to state that, all human beings are motivated by two and only two things. If I ask you to think about what they are, the answers I commonly get are money comes up first, depending on the industry. For clinical and hospital settings, I really do hear recognition, or things around recognition and support, like a job well done. And while those things may be motivating, that's actually an incorrect answer. There are only two things that motivate all people. One is fear, and one is desire. Every human being is pushed to action by one of those two things, fear or desire. Now, the desire side is a much more long-term, sustainable, and when I work with leaders, I urge them to do the little things to build that culture of desire rather than the culture of fear. As leaders, especially in a healthcare environment, it is so easy to build a fear-based environment. And what that is it's a consequence-based environment. The consequence-based environment is, we must do this or else, or Joint Commission will blank, or the patient will be in danger. We must blank. And so everything has this stink of mandatory. And I hate the word mandatory. And I know in the healthcare environment there are so many things that we have to make important and mandatory, but I build leaders into a vocabulary that handles this much differently, because nothing sucks the fun out of something like calling it mandatory. Watch. After this message, I invite you to have mandatory pancakes. See? Even pancakes sound awful if you make them mandatory. So take the example of somebody who is motivated by money, and that was their answer. I'm going to give you two examples of this money-motivated person. Person A is into toys. They want extra things. They want a jet ski. They like to take vacations. So they're money-motivated to work extra shifts, to put in whatever effort they need to make extra money. That person is money-motivated. The opposite of that is someone who is also money motivated. This person is a month behind on their mortgage and car payment. This person is also figuring out where the next grocery bill is going to come from. They and their kids have food insecurity. That person wants to work extra shifts and get whatever bonus they can from work, and they are also money motivated. Those two people have a very different mentality and mindset when they're coming to work. How they're stressed, how they're able to focus, the level of fear that's in them, right? One of them is in that desire-based place, and one of them is in that fear-based place. So as leaders, we do a lot of little things to add or subtract to that, and we don't even know that we're doing it. So there's a little bit of a checklist that I put people through to kind of get this sense of, is my environment a fear-based environment? And you can be assured that in this current crisis, every environment is a fear-based environment. So leaders have to make a special care and a special level of effort to drive as much of that fear-based motivation out of the workplace and pepper in as much of the desire-based, so people can really feel that in spite of these enormous challenges and incredible difficulties, they can have that sense of purpose, but they need to be connected to desire. So a really easy checklist is, I'm going to do an either or. If if you have a fear-based culture, people tend to just show up. If you have a desire-based culture, people tend to really be present. And hopefully you understand the difference between those two. In a fear-based culture, you tend to see people do just enough to get by. They tend to punch in a couple minutes after their start time was expected. They punch out just a couple minutes early on a regular basis. They do just enough to get it done. That desire-based, people have a tendency to want to stay late, to hang around, to check in with people. In a fear-based culture, people tend to want to have this attitude of just shut up and do your job. Be happy you have a job. Be lucky you have a job. Versus a desire-based culture, people are involved. They're vocal, which is not a negative thing. It means that they're engaged and they have questions and they're pushing for their rights. And that is it is a desire-based culture that has people that feel good that they can do that. A fear-based culture is where people need constant direction and correction. They hold back because they know that there's consequences to their actions, and they're told more about the consequences and the positive outcomes. If they're told all about good quality positive patient outcomes, people want to really be creative to achieve those. If they're told with a wagging finger, no, Joint Commission says we must do this and we must do it this way. I'm all for processes, but when people, especially when they're new to a unit or an organization, they get a lot of that, and it makes people very tentative, and it makes them not want to work on their own, and so they have that fear. So they do need constant direction and correction. Versus a desire-based culture, people find their own best way. It tends to be a culture of problem solvers rather than problem identifiers. In a fear-based culture, people can't wait to leave. In a desire-based culture, people can't wait to get there. Can't put it much more simply than that. The last one is people hear this is mandatory in a fear-based culture. That things that they are told are mandatory versus people hearing this is valuable. And how leaders can be really driving this is, rather than we must do this or else, you have to, you don't have a choice, leaders can really be shifting their mindset to outcomes that are positive. That we're doing this for the hundreds of patients that we serve. We are doing this for our community. This is valuable for the team, rather than do this or Joint Commission, or do this or Joint Commission will tag us, or we'll have to pay a fine. Or it's more like, do this because the team is going to love you for it. I'm asking you to do this hard job. The team is going to love you for it. Your patients are going to love you for it. So this fear-based versus a desire-based culture, leaders inadvertently do many things. And as I've shadowed nurse leaders in the past, I've seen with a little checklist, little tiny things that people thought were innate or inane and unimportant, benign, were actually all little building blocks for building this a fear-based culture, where people are wondering why there's low engagement, why there's low turnover, why people don't use an open door policy. Leaders think everything's great just because nobody used it. So to learn more about this, of course, you can always reach out to me through bushidoleadership.com. It's hospital week and nurses week in this time period, so I'm eager to push out a lot of content to support all of you that may need it. So please stay tuned. A lot more to come. Thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing from you. Please comment. Let me know your thoughts on this. I love engaging with all of you. Bye-bye.